Dr. Elena Vasquez had always been a night person, but working the late shift at the radio telescope facility still felt lonely sometimes. The desert around her was quiet, with only the soft humming of computers and the occasional beep from monitoring equipment to keep her company. She'd been studying space signals for 8 years now, hoping to find something extraordinary among all the cosmic noise. Tonight started like any other. Elena sat in her chair, coffee getting cold beside her keyboard, watching patterns scroll across multiple screens. Most of what came through was just random static from distant stars or interference from satellites. She'd learned to recognize the difference between real space signals and earthly junk that cluttered up their receivers. But around midnight, something changed. A new pattern appeared on her main monitor. Not random static, but organized pulses that repeated in a specific rhythm. Elena sat up straighter, suddenly wide awake. The signal was coming from somewhere beyond Earth's atmosphere, but it wasn't like anything in their database of known space phenomena. What made her heart race was that the pattern seemed to be responding to their own transmission. Tests from earlier that evening, every time their facility sent out a standard ping into space. This mysterious signal would answer back with a slightly different version of the same pattern. Elena checked all her equipment twice, making sure nothing was malfunctioning. Everything looked normal. She ran the signal through their analysis software, and the results made her hands shake with excitement. The transmission showed clear signs of artificial intelligence, mathematical sequences that no natural space phenomenon could create. Someone, or something, was talking back to them. Miles above Earth's atmosphere, Princess Zerdil floated inside her damaged escape pod, feeling more alone than she'd ever been in her 300 years of life. Her diplomatic mission had gone terribly wrong when asteroid debris tore through her escort ships. Now she was the only survivor, stranded near a primitive world that her people barely considered worthy of study. The ethereal Dominion had been her home among the stars for centuries. As royalty, she traveled to dozens of worlds, met countless species, and helped negotiate peace between civilizations that spanned entire solar systems. But none of that mattered now. Her long-range communications were dead. Her navigation systems were failing, and her rescue beacon wasn't strong enough to reach friendly ships. Her only option was to use this backward planet's crude radio waves to send a distress call. It was embarrassing for someone of her status, but survival mattered more than pride. She began transmitting basic mathematical sequences, hoping any intelligent life down there might recognize the patterns and respond. To her surprise, they did. The responses coming from the planet's surface were clumsy but earnest. Whoever was down there was clearly trying to communicate, sending back mathematical patterns and binary codes that showed real intelligence, even if their technology was centuries behind her own. Back at the observatory, Elena worked through the night, her excitement growing with each exchange. She started with simple mathematical concepts, prime numbers, basic equations, geometric patterns. Each time, the mysterious respondent would send back something slightly more complex, as if testing her understanding. By dawn, they moved beyond mathematics into symbolic communication. Elena would transmit a simple image using binary code, a circle, a square, a representation of Earth and its moon. The response would come back with similar symbols, but from the perspective of someone clearly not on Earth. The images showed multiple moons, different star patterns, and geometric designs unlike anything in human culture. Elena realized she was having humanity's first real conversation with an alien intelligence. Over the next few days, Elena couldn't focus on anything else. She requested extra night shifts, claiming she was working on a special research project. Her colleagues thought she was just being her usual workaholic self, and left her alone with her screens and coffee. The communications grew more sophisticated. The alien intelligence began asking questions about Earth through pictures and symbols. Elena found herself describing human culture, showing binary representations of art, music, and even simple emotions through mathematical relationships. What surprised her most was how the alien seemed genuinely curious about human life. instead of demanding technical information or showing signs of hostility. This intelligence wanted to know about Earth's oceans, its weather patterns, and even how humans expressed happiness or sadness. Elena started personalizing their exchanges, adding little touches that went beyond pure scientific communication. She'd include representations of sunrise over the desert, the way rain looked falling on the facility's windows, or the pattern of stars visible from Earth on clear nights. The responses became more personal too. The alien began sharing images of other worlds, vast cities floating in gas clouds, beings of pure energy dancing between stars, and landscapes so beautiful they made Elena cry just trying to imagine them in real life. After 2 weeks of nightly conversations, something unprecedented happened. Instead of mathematical patterns, Elena received a set of coordinates, Earth coordinates, pointing to a location in the desert about 50 miles from her facility. Elena stared at the coordinates for hours. Her scientific training told her this was dangerous, possibly a trap or a misunderstanding that could put her in real danger. But her curiosity was stronger than her fear. For the first time in human history, someone had the chance to meet an alien intelligence face to face. She didn't tell anyone at the facility where she was going. Elena just took her personal car and drove into the desert, following the coordinates to a flat area surrounded by red rock formations. She arrived just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. For an hour, nothing happened. Elena sat on her car's hood, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe she'd misunderstood the coordinates, or maybe the whole thing was some kind of elaborate joke by her colleagues. Then the air in front of her started to shimmer. It began as a heat-like distortion, the kind you might see rising from hot pavement in summer. But this distortion was perfectly circular and growing larger. Elena climbed down from her car, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the desert wind. The shimmering effect intensified, and slowly, incredibly, a figure began to appear. Inside it, Elena had imagined this moment countless times during their 2 weeks of communication. But nothing had prepared her for the reality. The being that materialized in front of her was clearly not human, but undeniably beautiful in a way that made her breath catch in her throat. Zeradil stood about 6 feet tall, with an elegant, slender form that seemed to glow with its own soft light. Her skin had a subtle iridescent quality that shifted between pale blue and silver, depending on how the last rays of sunlight hit her. Her eyes were large and luminous, filled with an intelligence that seemed both ancient and curious. What struck Elena most was how the alien princess carried herself, with the natural grace of someone accustomed to respect and authority, but also with a cautious gentleness that suggested she was as nervous about this meeting as Elena was. For several long moments, they just looked at each other across the desert sand. Elena, still trying to process that she was actually standing in front of an alien being, managed to raise her hand in what she hoped was a universal gesture of greeting. Zeradil tilted her head slightly, studying the gesture, then slowly raised her own hand in response. When she spoke, her voice came not from her mouth but seemed to resonate directly in Elena's mind, musical and clear, but definitely not human. You are the one who has been speaking with me through your electromagnetic communications, she said, each word carefully formed as if she was translating from another language. I am called Zeradil. I am grateful for your willingness to make contact. Elena found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. I'm Elena, and I think this is the most incredible moment in human history. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky above them, 2 beings from different worlds stood in a desert on Earth, beginning a conversation that would change everything they thought they knew about love, sacrifice, and the vast possibilities hidden among the stars. The first few minutes of their meeting felt like the most awkward conversation Elena had ever experienced. Zeradil stood perfectly still, her luminous form shimmering slightly in the desert evening, while Elena fidgeted nervously with her car keys and tried to think of something appropriate to say to an alien princess. Your communication device, Zeradil said, pointing toward Elena's radio equipment in the back seat. It creates very crude electromagnetic patterns, but you use it with remarkable creativity for such primitive technology. Elena wasn't sure if she'd just been complimented or insulted. Thanks, I think. We're still learning about space communication. Actually, we're still learning that there's anyone out there to communicate with. Zeradil tilted her head in a way that reminded Elena of a curious bird. Your species has no contact with other civilizations. That explains the simple nature of your transmissions. Most worlds establish interstellar communication within their first 1,000 years of development. How old is your civilization? Elena asked, then immediately felt stupid for the question. The ethereal dominion has existed for over 50,000 of your Earth years. I myself have lived for approximately 3 centuries. Though I am still considered quite young by my people's standards, Elena's mind reeled. She was talking to someone who had been alive since before America was even discovered by Europeans, and she was considered young. What's it like, living that long, until recently? I thought it was normal, Zeradil replied, and Elena caught something almost sad in her mental voice. My people experience time differently than yours. We focus on long-term planning, cosmic events, the rise and fall of civilizations. But speaking with you these past weeks, I have begun to understand something called urgency, the way short-lived beings can feel each moment more intensely. Over the following days, Elena found excuses to return to their meeting spot in the desert. She told her supervisor she was conducting atmospheric interference tests that required field work. Technically, it wasn't entirely a lie. She was definitely studying atmospheric interference, just not the kind her boss expected. Zeradil's escape pod remained cloaked nearby, invisible to human eyes but providing her with shelter and the basic necessities of life. Elena learned that the princess didn't need food the way humans did, but instead absorbed energy directly from various sources: starlight, electromagnetic fields, even the emotional resonance of other living beings. You are quite energetically active, Zeradil mentioned during one of their meetings. Most primitive species emit very basic life energy, but humans seem to experience emotions with unusual intensity. It's fascinating. Primitive? Elena raised an eyebrow. You keep using that word. Zeradil's form flickered slightly, which Elena was learning meant she was embarrassed. I apologize. That is how my people classify developing civilizations. But after speaking with you, I realize the term is inadequate. Your species may be technologically young, but you have qualities that many advanced civilizations have lost. Elena brought books during their next meeting: poetry collections, art books, even a portable music player loaded with everything from classical symphonies to modern pop songs. Zeradil examined each item with intense curiosity, her luminous fingers passing through the pages like moonlight. Your people create beauty for its own sake, she observed after Elena played her a recording of rainfall mixed with piano music. Not for communication, not for practical purposes, but simply because it pleases you. This is remarkable. Don't your people make art? We create what you might call art, but it serves specific functions: historical records, mathematical expressions, spiritual ceremonies. But this, she gestured to the music player, serves no function except to make the listener feel something. It's wonderfully inefficient. Elena laughed. I've never heard art described as wonderfully inefficient before, but I kind of like it. As weeks passed, their meetings became less formal and more comfortable. Elena would bring dinner and eat while Zeradil absorbed ambient energy from the desert sunset. They talked about everything: Elena's work, her dreams of space exploration, her loneliness working nights at the observatory. Zeradil shared stories of worlds where entire cities floated in gas giant atmospheres, of beings made of living crystal who sang in harmony across light years, of ancient civilizations that had transcended physical form entirely. Why are you here? Elena asked one evening. I mean, what was your mission on Earth? Zeradil's glow dimmed slightly. I was not coming to Earth originally. My diplomatic fleet was traveling to negotiate a peace treaty between my people and another species, the Void Collective. The negotiations are delicate. Our peoples have been at war for centuries, and this was our first real chance at lasting peace. My ship was damaged in an asteroid storm. By now, My people believe I am dead. The peace talks have likely failed without my presence. I was chosen specifically because I have abilities that make me valuable as a mediator. I can sense the emotional undertones beneath spoken words, detect deception, and find common ground between very different ways of thinking. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night air. So people are probably dying right now because you're stuck here. It is possible, Zerdiel admitted. This is why I must find a way to contact my fleet and arrange rescue. But my communication systems were damaged in the crash, and your planet's electromagnetic interference makes long-range contact extremely difficult. What if we work together? Elena offered immediately. I know Earth's communication systems better than anyone. You know alien technology. Maybe between the two of us, we could figure out how to get a message to your people. Zerdiel's form brightened noticeably. You would help me, even though my departure would end our meetings? Elena felt something twist in her chest at the thought, but she pushed it aside. Of course. If there's a chance to prevent a war, we have to try. They began working together the next day. Elena brought technical manuals and communication equipment from the observatory, while Zerdiel shared the principles behind ethereal technology. Elena discovered that her new friend's people used quantum entanglement to send messages instantly across vast distances. But the technology required specific crystal formations that didn't exist on Earth. What about creating synthetic crystals? Elena suggested after studying Zerdiel's damaged communication device. We have some pretty advanced materials science. Maybe we could grow the crystals you need artificially. The resonance patterns would need to be perfect, Zerdiel explained. Even small imperfections would prevent quantum entanglement. But perhaps, if we combine your material synthesis with my ability to shape matter at the molecular level, their collaboration revealed how perfectly their skills complemented each other. Elena's human intuition and creative problem-solving paired beautifully with Zerdiel's vast technical knowledge and precise control over physical matter. Working together felt natural, like they'd been partners for years instead of weeks. But as their friendship deepened, Elena began to notice changes in herself. She looked forward to their meetings with an intensity that surprised her. She found herself thinking about Zerdiel during the day, wondering what new stories she'd share, what questions she'd ask about human culture. More troubling, she'd started dreaming about distant worlds and impossible cities among the stars, always with a shimmering figure beside her, showing her wonders beyond imagination. Elena, Zerdiel said during one of their work sessions, I must tell you something. My people's emotional experiences are typically quite controlled, we feel, but not with the intensity that humans do. However, since beginning our communications, I have been experiencing what I can only describe as anticipation, excitement, and something my translation systems call affection regarding our meetings. Elena's hand stilled on the crystal matrix they've been building. What does that mean exactly? I believe it means that I value our friendship beyond its practical benefits. The prospect of leaving Earth has become difficult to contemplate. Elena looked up at Zerdiel's luminous face, seeing something there that made her heart race. Yeah, she said quietly, I know exactly what you mean. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Unaware that two beings from different worlds were discovering that the universe's greatest mystery wasn't hidden in distant galaxies, but in the space between two hearts learning to understand each other. 3 months had passed since Elena and Zerdiel first met in the desert, and their nightly meetings had become the most important part of Elena's life. What started as scientific collaboration had grown into something neither of them had expected, a connection that seemed to transcend the vast differences between their species. Elena had gotten creative with her excuses at work. She convinced her supervisor that she was conducting long-term atmospheric studies that required extended field observations. Her colleagues thought she was just being her usual dedicated self, spending extra hours on research projects. If only they knew the truth, the communication device they'd been building together was nearly complete. Using a combination of Earth's synthetic crystal technology and Zerdiel's ability to manipulate matter at the quantum level, they created something that shouldn't have been possible. a hybrid communication system that could theoretically send messages across interstellar distances. The quantum resonance patterns are stabilizing, Zerathiel reported, her luminous hands moving over the device they'd assembled in a small cave near their usual meeting spot. I believe we could establish contact with my people within the next few days. Elena should have felt excited about their success, but instead, a heavy feeling settled in her stomach. Success meant Zerathiel would leave. Success meant the end of everything that had made her life worth living for the past 3 months. That's great, Elena said, trying to sound enthusiastic. Your people must be worried about you. In those peace negotiations you mentioned, maybe it's not too late to fix things. Zerathiel's glow dimmed slightly. Over the months, Elena had learned to read these subtle changes in her friend's luminosity like facial expressions. Right now, Zerathiel looked as conflicted as Elena felt. Yes, Zerathiel said slowly. My duty to my people must come first. The potential for war between the ethereal dominion and the Void Collective grows stronger with each day I remain missing. But even as she spoke about duty and responsibility, Zerathiel's attention kept drifting to Elena. During their months together, the alien princess had experienced emotions her people rarely felt, the joy of discovery, the warmth of friendship, and something else she was only beginning to understand. Elena, Zerathiel said one evening as they put the finishing touches on their communication array. There is something I must tell you about my people. We do not typically form the kind of individual attachments that humans do. Our relationships are based on shared purpose, cosmic harmony, and collective benefit. Elena looked up from the crystal matrix she'd been adjusting. That sounds kind of lonely. I thought it was normal, Zerathiel replied. But spending time with you has shown me something different. You humans form what you call emotional bonds. Connections that exist simply because you enjoy being together. Because you care about each other's happiness for no practical reason. And that's bad somehow. Zerathiel's form flickered with what Elena had learned was uncertainty. Not bad, but dangerous for someone in my position. I am royalty, Elena. My life belongs to my people and their needs. Personal attachments can cloud judgment, create conflicts of interest, lead to poor decisions that affect millions of lives. Elena felt her heart sink. So what you're saying is that when you leave, we go back to being strangers? Like none of this ever happened? That would be the logical course of action, Zerathiel said. But her voice carried no conviction. Their work sessions became strained after that conversation. Both of them focused intently on technical details, avoiding personal topics. But the connection between them had grown too strong to simply ignore. Elena found herself memorizing every detail of Zerathiel's luminous form. The musical quality of her mental voice, the graceful way she moved through the desert air. Zerathiel, meanwhile, was experiencing something her people called soul binding, a rare phenomenon where two consciousness connect so deeply that separation becomes physically painful. It had been documented in ethereal history, but always as a cautionary tale about the dangers of uncontrolled emotional attachment. The crisis came when they finally succeeded in making contact with Zerathiel's people. Elena was adjusting the signal amplifier when suddenly the entire communication array blazed to life. Complex patterns of light danced through the crystals, and Zerathiel's form brightened dramatically as she connected with the device. I have them, she said, her voice filled with excitement and relief. I'm speaking with the ethereal fleet. Elena stepped back, giving Zerathiel privacy for what she assumed would be an emotional reunion with her people. But as the conversation continued, she noticed Zerathiel's posture becoming more rigid, her glow taking on cooler, more formal tones. Yes, Commander Velter, Zerathiel was saying, I am unharmed and ready for immediate extraction. My location is... What do you mean? Compromised. Elena couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she could see the growing distress in Zerathiel's posture. Something was wrong. You have been monitoring my interactions? Zerathiel's mental voice carried a sharp edge Elena had never heard before. Without my consent or knowledge? The conversation continued for several more minutes, growing increasingly tense. Finally, Zerathiel disconnected the communication link and turned to Elena with an expression of anguish. They have been watching us, she said quietly. My people have been monitoring our meetings through quantum trace analysis of my energy patterns. They know everything about our friendship. Elena felt cold despite the warm desert night, and that's a problem, according to my commander. Yes, they believe that prolonged contact with your species has created what they call cognitive contamination. They think human emotional patterns have affected my judgment and made me unfit for diplomatic service. That's ridiculous, Eleanor protested. You're the same person you always were. Am I? Zerdil asked sadly. 3 months ago, I would have prioritized my duty above all personal considerations. Now, the thought of leaving you feels like it might tear my consciousness apart. By my people's standards, I have indeed been contaminated. Eleanor reached out, instinctively to comfort her friend, then stopped herself. Even that simple gesture felt loaded with meaning now that they both knew their connection was considered dangerous by Zerdil's people. There's more, Zerdil continued. The rescue fleet will arrive tomorrow night, but they are bringing memory modification technology. They intend to erase all traces of our interactions. From both of our minds, Elena felt the world spin around her. They can do that. Ethereal mental technology is very advanced. They can selectively remove specific memories while leaving everything else intact. You would remember your work at the observatory, your life before our meeting, but nothing of our time together. To you, it would be as if I never existed. The idea horrified Elena more than she could express. The past 3 months had been the most meaningful of her entire life. The conversations, the laughter, the wonder of discovering that the universe was vast and beautiful and full of intelligent life. All of it would be gone, leaving nothing but a vague sense that something important was missing from her life. What if we ran? Elena asked desperately. Your ship is still functional, right? We could leave Earth, find somewhere else to go. Zerdil's glow dimmed to almost nothing. And abandon my people when they need me most, Elena. The peace negotiations have completely broken down in my absence. The Void Collective claims my disappearance proves the ethereal dominion cannot be trusted. Military fleets are already positioning themselves for conflict. If I don't return and help restore the peace process, billions of beings across dozens of worlds could die in the war that follows. Elena stared at their communication device, understanding the impossible choice they faced. Stay together and let civilizations burn, or separate forever to save lives neither of them would ever meet. So that's it then, Elena said quietly. Tomorrow night, they take you home, erase our memories, and we go back to being alone in our respective corners of the universe. Zerdil moved closer, her luminous form casting Elena's shadow on the cave wall. There's one other option, but you would never agree to it. Tell me. I could refuse extraction, declare myself a voluntary exile, and renounce my royal status. Without me, the peace process would likely fail and war would follow. But we would be together. Elena looked at her friend, the being who had shown her wonders beyond imagination, who had made her feel less alone in the vast cosmos, who had become more important to her than her own life. The thought of choosing their happiness over the lives of billions was tempting and horrible at the same time. You're right, Elena said finally. I would never ask you to make that choice. And neither should I have to make the choice between loving you and letting people die because of it. They spent their final night together sitting in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, both of them memorizing every moment, knowing that by the next evening, none of it would matter anymore. As dawn approached, Elena made a decision that would change everything. Zerdil, she said quietly. What if there was a third option? What if the problem isn't our connection, but what other people think about it? I don't understand. Elena stood up, pacing to the mouth of the cave where she could see the first light of. Elena's plan seemed brilliant in the early morning light, but as the day wore on and the reality of Zerdil's rescue fleet approaching Earth, doubt crept into her mind. What if her idea backfired? What if trying to prove their connection was valuable only made things worse for both of them? By evening, she made a decision that broke her heart but felt like the only right choice she could make. Zerdil, Elena said when they met at their usual spot in the desert. I've been thinking about everything all day, and I realize we're being selfish. Zerathiel's luminous form flickered with confusion. Selfish? How? Elena had practiced this speech all afternoon, but saying the words out loud felt like swallowing broken glass. We're so focused on what we want that we're forgetting about everyone else who needs you. Your people, the peace negotiations, all those lives hanging in the balance. I can't be the reason a war starts, Elena. What are you saying? I'm saying you should go home tonight when your fleet arrives. You should go with them and let them erase my memories. It's the right thing to do. Zerathiel glowed into almost nothing, but our plan to prove that our connection could help with diplomacy was a fantasy. Elena interrupted, hating herself for the lie. I was grasping at straws because I didn't want to lose you. But the truth is, your people are probably right. I am a distraction. Your job is too important to risk on someone like me. Elena couldn't look at Zerathiel's face as she spoke. She knew that if she saw the pain there, she'd break down and admit the truth, that she was sacrificing their love to save billions of lives, and it was destroying her inside. Someone like you? Zerathiel's mental voice carried hurt and confusion. Elena, you are the most remarkable being I have ever encountered. Your creativity, your compassion, your willingness to help a stranger from another world. These qualities are exactly what the galaxy needs more of. Then take those qualities with you, Elena said, finally meeting Zerathiel's luminous eyes. Remember what you learned here and use it to help make peace with the Void Collective. But do it as yourself, not as someone who's been compromised by attachment to a primitive human. The words felt like poison in Elena's mouth, but she forced herself to say them. She had to make Zerathiel believe this was what she really wanted, or the alien princess would never be able to leave with a clear conscience. Zerathiel stared at her for a long moment. Then her form began to fade as she retreated into her cloaked escape pod. If this is truly your decision, then I will respect it. The extraction team will arrive within the hour. Elena watched the shimmer in the air disappear, taking with it the most important relationship of her life. She sat alone in the desert as darkness fell, waiting for alien ships to come and take away even the memory of love she'd found among the stars. The ethereal fleet arrived exactly when predicted. 3 sleek vessels that materialized out of empty air like silver ghosts. Elena watched from a distance as Zerathiel emerged from her pod and was greeted by beings who looked similar to her but somehow colder, more formal. She couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see the body language. Zerathiel stood rigid and obedient as her rescuers spoke to her, occasionally glancing in Elena's direction with what looked like longing. Finally, one of the ethereal beings approached Elena. Unlike Zerathiel's warm glow, this one's luminosity felt clinical and distant. Human Elena Vasquez. The being said in a voice that resonated directly in her mind. I am Commander Velter of the Ethereal Dominion. Our records indicate you have had extensive contact with Princess Zerathiel during her period of isolation on your world. That's right, Elena replied, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. This contact has created complications that must be resolved before the princess can resume her diplomatic duties. We will now implement memory modification protocols to remove all traces of these interactions from your consciousness. The process is painless and will leave your other memories intact, Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak in a few minutes. The last 3 months would be erased from her mind. Like they never happened, she'd go back to her lonely job at the observatory, never knowing that she'd once held conversations with an alien princess under the stars. One moment, Zerathiel's voice cut through the night air. She approached Elena and the commander, her posture tense with some internal struggle. Princess, Commander Velter said with obvious disapproval, the contamination protocols must be implemented immediately. Further delay risks additional cognitive corruption. I understand the protocols, Zerathiel replied sharply, but I request permission to say goodbye to Elena before the memory modification begins. The commander's glow flickered with what Elena was learning to recognize as alien annoyance. Emotional farewells will only reinforce the inappropriate attachments we are trying to eliminate. Nevertheless, I request this courtesy. Elena found herself alone with Zerathiel one final time. As the commander retreated to prepare the memory modification equipment, they stood facing each other in the desert darkness. Both knowing these were their last moments together, Elena, Zerdiel said quietly, I want you to know that these months with you have been the most meaningful of my entire existence. You showed me what it means to care about someone for no practical reason, to find joy in simple conversations, to feel connected to another consciousness across all the barriers of species and distance. Elena felt tears running down her cheeks. I want you to know that meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. You showed me that the universe is bigger and more wonderful than I ever imagined. I will carry the memory of our friendship with me always, Zerdiel promised. Even when you have forgotten I ever existed, I will remember enough love for both of us. Elena wanted to tell her the truth then, that she was lying about wanting the memory wipe, that she was sacrificing their love to ensure Zerdiel could fulfill her duty without guilt, but saying it would only make the separation harder for both of them instead. She reached out and touched Zerdiel's luminous hand, feeling a tingle of energy pass between them. Goodbye, Princess. Save the galaxy for all of us. The memory modification process was exactly as painless as Commander Velter had promised. Elena felt a slight buzzing sensation in her head, and then nothing. She found herself standing alone in the desert with no clear memory of how she'd gotten there. She must have driven out to take atmospheric readings, she decided. Her equipment was scattered around her car, and she had vague memories of running some kind of long-term communication test. But the details felt fuzzy, like trying to remember a dream after waking up. Elena gathered her equipment and drove back to the observatory, feeling strangely melancholy for reasons she couldn't explain. Over the following weeks, she threw herself into her work with unusual intensity, as if trying to fill some empty space in her life that she couldn't quite identify. Meanwhile, Zerdiel returned to the ethereal dominion and resumed her diplomatic duties. But the experience on Earth had changed her in ways that no memory modification could erase. She approached the peace negotiations with the Void Collective, with new insight into the value of individual perspectives and emotional connections. However, her changed approach was not well received by either side. The Ethereal High Council found her arguments about the importance of personal bonds between negotiators to be illogical and inefficient. The Void Collective representatives interpreted her emotional appeals as signs of weakness and instability. The peace talks collapsed within days of her return. What followed was exactly what Elena had feared, a gradual escalation toward full-scale war. Military fleets began moving through space, territorial disputes erupted into armed conflicts, and neutral worlds found themselves forced to choose sides in a galaxy-spanning confrontation. Zerdiel watched the breakdown of peace with growing anguish, knowing that her time on Earth had somehow contributed to the failure. But she couldn't understand how or why. The memories of her months with Elena had been carefully preserved by her people's medical technology, but the emotional connections that gave those memories meaning had been severed. She remembered Elena as an interesting primitive who had helped repair her communication systems, but the deep love and understanding they'd shared felt distant and theoretical, like reading about someone else's experiences. The worst part was the dreams. Every night, Zerdiel found herself dreaming of a desert world where she'd once felt truly happy. In these dreams, she was always searching for something important that she'd lost, but she could never remember what it was when she woke up on Earth. Elena experienced similar dreams. She would find herself staring at the stars during her night shifts, feeling like someone important was out there among them, waiting for her. But whenever she tried to focus on the feeling, it slipped away like water through her fingers. Both of them had no idea that the galaxy was sliding toward a war that could have been prevented. If only they had been brave enough to fight for their love instead of sacrificing it for duty. But sometimes, late at night when the desert was quiet and the stars were bright, Elena would catch herself speaking to the empty air, as if someone was listening, and sometimes, across the vast distances of space, Zerdiel would find herself answering questions that no one. 6 months after Zerdiel's departure, Elena found herself working longer and longer hours at the observatory. Driven by a restless energy she couldn't explain, she'd submitted request after request to expand their deep space monitoring programs, claiming she was working on breakthrough research into extraterrestrial communication patterns. Her supervisor thought she was having some kind of career breakthrough, but Elena knew the truth was more complicated. She felt like she was searching for something among the radio signals from space, though she had no idea what. That's when she received the message that changed everything. It came through on a frequency she'd been monitoring for months without knowing why. The signal was complex, layered with mathematical patterns that seemed familiar yet completely alien. But embedded within the technical data was something that made Elena's heart race. Personal references that could only be meant for her, binary representations of desert sunsets, the mathematical relationship between raindrops on windows, the precise star pattern visible from Earth on a specific date 6 months ago. Someone out there was trying to remind her of memories she didn't have. Elena spent 3 days decoding the full message, working frantically as if her life depended on it. When she finally translated the complete communication, she found herself staring at words that should have meant nothing to her but somehow meant everything. Elena, they made me forget how to love you, but they could not make me forget that I once did. The galaxy is falling into war because I lost the part of myself that understood peace. Please remember what they made us forget. The universe needs our love more than our sacrifice. Elena's hand shook as she read the message over and over. Intellectually, it made no sense. She had no memory of anyone named Z. No memory of love that had been erased. But emotionally, every word resonated like a tuning fork struck in her chest. She began to remember fragments, not clear memories, but feelings and impressions. The sensation of standing under stars with someone who glowed like moonlight. The sound of laughter that existed only in her mind. The certainty that she'd once held conversations that changed her. Understanding of the universe, Elena made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Using every bit of her authority at the observatory, she commandeered the most powerful transmission array and began broadcasting a response on the same frequency. Z, I don't remember you, but I remember the empty space where you used to be. If you're out there, if what you're saying is true, then find a way back to me. Whatever we had, whatever we lost, maybe we can find it again. Her message was received by Zerathiel aboard a diplomatic vessel traveling between war zones, trying desperately to negotiate ceasefires that lasted mere days before falling apart. When the alien princess heard Elena's voice transmitted across the void of space, something inside her that had been dormant for months suddenly blazed back to life. The partial memories came flooding back, not the technical details of their time together, but the emotions, the joy of discovery, the warmth of connection, the certainty that understanding between different species was not only possible, but essential for cosmic peace. Zerathiel made her own desperate decision. Against all orders and protocols, she programmed her ship's navigation system for Earth and began the journey that would either save both their civilizations or brand her as a traitor forever. Her unauthorized departure from the peace negotiations triggered a massive crisis. The ethereal High Council declared her mentally unstable and sent pursuit ships to retrieve her. The Void Collective interpreted her flight as evidence that the entire peace process had been a deception from the beginning. Military fleets from both civilizations began converging on Earth's solar system, each side certain that the other was using the primitive human world as a base for secret operations. Elena, monitoring communications from her observatory, watched in horror as alien warships appeared in Earth's space, turning her quiet planet into the center of an interstellar confrontation. When Zerathiel's ship materialized in Earth's atmosphere, every military satellite and tracking station on the planet detected it simultaneously. Within hours, government forces had surrounded the observatory where Elena worked, demanding answers about her communications with extraterrestrial forces. Elena found herself in the surreal position of being questioned by military officials about relationships she couldn't remember with aliens she couldn't recall meeting. But even under interrogation, she refused to stop broadcasting to Zerathiel, guided by instincts she couldn't explain. The reunion happened under the worst possible circumstances. Zerdil materialized in the observatory just as alien fleets faced off in Earth's orbit and human military forces prepared for first contact protocols. Elena saw her and felt a rush of recognition so powerful it brought her to her knees. "I remember," she whispered, looking at Zerdil as luminous form. "Not the details, but the feeling. I remember loving you. And I remember what you taught me about the power of individual connections," Zerdil replied, moving closer as alarms blared around them. "But Elena, I fear our love has doomed 3 civilizations to war. The fleets above us are preparing to fight because they believe the other side has corrupted me through contact with your species." Elena looked at the communication arrays around them, then at the alien princess who had risked everything to return to her. Maybe that's exactly the problem. Everyone's so afraid of corruption and contamination that they can't see the truth. What truth? Elena's mind raced as pieces of the solution began forming. The truth that you and I discovered together. The truth that understanding between different species isn't contamination. It's evolution. It's the next step forward for everyone, working together with desperate efficiency. Elena and Zerdil began broadcasting simultaneously to all 3 fleets, using every communication array on Earth and Zerdil's ship systems. Instead of trying to negotiate or justify their actions, they did something unprecedented. They shared their story, not the sanitized diplomatic version, but the real truth, how 2 beings from completely different worlds had found common ground. Through curiosity and respect, how they learned from each other, grown because of each other, and discovered that love could bridge any gap if people were willing to be vulnerable enough to try. More importantly, they revealed what they'd discovered in their months of monitoring each other's communications. The entire conflict between the Ethereal Dominion and the Void Collective had been artificially escalated by a third party, war profiteers, who sold weapons and services to both sides, and had been manipulating diplomatic communications to prevent lasting peace. Elena's human communication technology, combined with Zerdil's access to both alien information networks, allowed them to trace the source of the manipulated messages and provide proof of the deception to all 3 civilizations. Simultaneously, the revelation that they'd all been played against each other created an unprecedented moment of clarity. Faced with evidence of their common enemy, the military fleets that had been preparing for battle found themselves working together to track down the war profiteers who had been pulling their strings. But the real breakthrough came when Elena and Zerdil demonstrated something that had never been tried before: true cooperative communication between 3 completely different species. Elena's intuitive creativity, Zerdil's telepathic abilities, and the logical communication protocols of human technology created a new kind of understanding that none of them had achieved alone. The peace that followed wasn't just an end to hostilities, but the beginning of something revolutionary, a galactic communication network that allowed different species to share perspectives and find common ground across the vast differences in their biology and culture. 5 years later, Elena stood on the observation deck of the Harmony Station, a massive space facility built at the edge of all 3 civilizations' territories. The station served as a neutral meeting ground for diplomatic exchanges and, more importantly, as a research center where beings from dozens of different worlds worked together to establish peaceful first contact with newly discovered species. Zerdil found her there, looking out at the stars where new civilizations were sending their first tentative signals into space, hoping someone friendly might answer. "The Meridian Council just approved our next mission," Zerdil said, settling beside Elena in the way that had become natural over their years together. "The species in the Centauri cluster has been broadcasting mathematical sequences for the past 3 months." Elena smiled, remembering her own first attempts to communicate with an alien intelligence through mathematics and binary code. "Think they're ready for visitors? I think they're ready to learn what we learn, that the universe is much bigger and more wonderful when you're not alone in it." Elena took Zerdil's luminous hand in hers, feeling the familiar tingle of energy that passed between them. Their love story had become legend across multiple worlds, not as a cautionary tale about the dangers of interspecies contact, but as proof that understanding and connection were possible between any forms of consciousness. Willing to reach toward each other, ready to go make some new friends, Elena asked. Gesturing toward the stars. With you, Zerdil replied.